Afghanistan on the brink. Prelude to Invasion 1970s. By Christmas 1979, Afghanistan was a nation teetering on the edge of chaos. Soviet armored divisions surged across the Afghan border toward Kabul, while helicopters secured vital mountain passes through the formidable Hindukush Range. In Moscow, the Politburo had resolved to intervene to prevent the collapse of Afghanistan's communist government, which was under siege from increasingly organized insurgents controlling much of the countryside. The Red Army leadership, however, remained skeptical about whether they could pacify the country militarily. Afghanistan in the 1970s was historically a crossroads of empires and political instability. Following World War II, King Zahir Shah presided over a period of relative stability, cautiously implementing reforms to modernize the nation without provoking conservative backlash. Yet the king simultaneously suppressed those demanding radical change, including Afghan communists who were already aligned with the Soviet KGB. By 1964, Zahir introduced a more liberal constitution that allowed political parties to emerge, igniting political activity across Kabul's universities. Students and intellectuals formed organizations spanning moderates, monarchists, Islamists, and communists. The communists, who would later form the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan (PDPA), were led by figures such as Hafizullah, Amin, Babruk, Karamel, and Nur Muhammad Taraki. These leaders admired Soviet modernization, though they initially garnered support only among a small group of urban elites and Soviet-trained army officers. Internal splits between hardliners like Taraki and moderates like Karamel reflected the ideological tensions within the party, while Islamists, encouraged by the king as a counterweight to Marxist influence, debated the future of modern Islamic society. Groups like Jamiat-e-Islami drew inspiration from Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood, establishing a base among students and intellectuals. Afghanistan's international relations were equally complex. The 1960s saw Soviet-equipped Afghan forces clash with Pakistan over Pashtun territories, while Kabul simultaneously sought aid from both sides of the Cold War. Though officially non-aligned, Afghanistan leaned heavily on Soviet support for infrastructure while also benefiting from American, West German, and other Western advisors. Scholar Louis Dupree noted the privileged position of both Soviet and American technicians, who enjoyed accommodations, amenities, and social status that reflected the Cold War's reach into Afghanistan's modernization programs. Despite urban progress, rural areas resisted social changes such as women's education, leaving modernization uneven and sparking tensions that would later fuel conflict. Coups, communists, and rising Islamism in 1973. Mohammad Daoud Khan seized power in a military-backed coup, initially allying with moderate communists but soon consolidating power as a strongman, silencing opposition, and purging the civil service and officer corps. His policies, while progressive in parts, provoked Afghan Islamists, many of whom fled to Pakistan to train and organize with support from the ISI. The failed Islamist attacks of 1975, including operations in the Panjshir Valley, underscored the insurgents' resilience despite exile and limited resources. Pakistan provided a safe haven for these groups, allowing them to regroup and maintain ideological influence. Daoud attempted to navigate foreign relations cautiously, seeking development aid and military support from multiple nations while maintaining ties to the Soviet Union. Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev, concerned with protecting decades of investment, cautioned Daoud on perceived threats from NATO personnel and Western intelligence, but was rebuffed by the Afghan leader, who asserted Afghanistan's independence in choosing foreign partners. By April 1978, growing unrest erupted following the funeral of a prominent Afghan communist, leading to Daoud's arrest of PDPA leaders. The communists, now better organized and united, leveraged support from KGB-backed army officers. The Soor Revolution erupted as tanks and jet fighters rolled into Kabul, resulting in the assassination of Daoud and more than 1,000 of his followers. Survivors recalled the shock of hearing revolutionary proclamations broadcast over the radio, signaling the PDPA's control. The coup surprised both the United States and the Soviet Union, as each assumed the other was involved. Under the Revolutionary Council led by Taraki and Amin, the PDPA enacted radical reforms, including land redistribution and women's rights, while ruthlessly suppressing opposition through imprisonment, torture, and mass executions. Taraki publicly maintained that Afghanistan would remain non-aligned, but neighboring states and Western powers remained skeptical. Pakistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United States covertly supported Mujahideen groups in opposition, framing them as defenders of Islam against a brutal communist regime. The Soviet Union cautiously welcomed the PDPA, agreeing to send military advisors and aid. Yet the party's internal divisions and violent tactics raised concerns in Moscow about long-term stability and the population. As resistance to secular communist rule, political infighting, and escalating violence, the PDPA's internal power struggle intensified in 1979, weakening the party's control and fueling the insurgency. In February, the kidnapping and subsequent death of U.S. Ambassador Adolph Dubs in Kabul highlighted the instability, prompting the U.S. to suspend aid programs. In March, a week-long uprising in Herat demonstrated the fragility of Afghan government forces, with an entire army division mutinying and protesters targeting PDPA officials and Soviet advisors. Death tolls from the Herat uprising alone ranged from 3,000 to 25,000, illustrating the devastating consequences of the regime's brutality. Further uprisings in provinces like Kunar compounded the crisis, with civilians witnessing violent crackdowns and arbitrary executions. A frightened Taraki appealed to Moscow for intervention, emphasizing the regime's lack of support and the insufficiency of Afghan forces to control nationwide insurgencies. Politburo members debated the risks of intervention, with some, like KGB head Yuri Andropov, warning that Afghanistan's underdevelopment would make socialist reforms difficult without excessive force. Nonetheless, the growing insurgency, compounded by Amin's rise to prime minister and later consolidation of power through the assassination of Taraki, convinced the Soviets that decisive action was necessary. By late 1979, Amin's overtures to the United States and United Kingdom exacerbated Soviet fears. Feeling suspicions, though unsubstantiated, that he might be a CIA agent, Moscow's response included deploying more military advisors, airborne battalions, and equipment, while formally maintaining that troops were present to protect Amin and support the Afghan government. Afghan insurgents, however, quickly recognized the Soviet presence, noting that advisors had engaged in combat alongside Afghan forces. This set the stage for the Soviet Politburo's final deliberations on intervention and regime change, balancing Cold War strategy with the pragmatic realities of Afghan instability. Planning the invasion, Operation Cyclone 79, the Soviet decision to invade Afghanistan was shaped by a convergence of internal Afghan chaos and Cold War geopolitics. On December 12, 1979, the Politburo secretly authorized a regime change, intending to remove Amin and install the moderate Babrak Karmel. The plan, codenamed Operation Cyclone 79, also included a limited military deployment to deter Islamist insurgents and prevent potential Iranian or Pakistani interference. Despite warnings from Soviet military leadership about alienating the Muslim world and suffering global political damage, party officials, including Andropov, prioritized ideological and strategic concerns over diplomatic repercussions. Defense Minister Dmitry Ustinov issued orders to prepare an initial invasion force comprising 52,000 men from the newly established 40th Army, including motor rifle divisions, air assault regiments, and airborne units tasked with seizing key urban and strategic sites. The plan involved multiple coordinated pincer movements, airlifts, and the securing of vital mountain passes and infrastructure, with the intent of presenting the operation as friendly assistance while simultaneously eliminating aim. The Soviets also assembled special units, including KGB teams, Zenit, and Gram, as well as the Muslim battalion composed of Central Asian soldiers wearing Afghan uniforms to blend in. The complexities of infiltrating Kabul and capturing the fortified Tajberg Palace. Amin's residence required careful coordination, reconnaissance, and tactical precision. The palace was heavily defended, with Afghan troops, tanks, and anti-aircraft artillery posing significant obstacles, necessitating the division of Soviet forces into multiple assault groups with specialized roles for neutralizing defenses, pinning down enemy forces, and providing fire support. Operation Storm 333, the assault on Amin's palace, would become a landmark example of Soviet special operations, combining sabotage, misinformation, and direct combat in a high-stakes mission. The assault on Kabul and the fall of Amin on December 27, 1979, Operation Storm 333, commenced. Amin, unaware of the imminent betrayal, initially believed the Soviets were allies, confident in the support he had requested multiple times. A failed poisoning attempt by the KGB heightened tensions, signaling that Amin's fate was sealed. Soviet teams simultaneously launched sabotage operations across Kabul, targeting infrastructure, military vehicles, and communications to weaken Afghan defenses. Assault groups moved into the city to secure government buildings, ministries, prisons, and the TV and radio center. At Tajberg Palace, Soviet assault groups faced fierce resistance from Amin's forces. Heavy fighting ensued as Soviet troops stormed the palace, employing Shilka anti-aircraft systems, grenade launchers, and infantry assaults to neutralize tanks, artillery, and Afghan soldiers. Despite heavy casualties, the Soviet forces overcame the defenders within 43 minutes, killing Amin, his 2 sons, and most of his bodyguards. Approximately 200 Afghans and up to 100 Soviet troops were killed, with hundreds more captured or wounded. The operation was hailed as a daring and effective special mission, later serving as a case study in Russian airborne and intelligence academies for combining direct assault, sabotage, and disinformation in urban warfare. The success of Storm 333 enabled the rapid installation of Babur Karamel as the new Afghan leader, a move executed within days, highlighting the meticulous planning and operational coordination that underpinned the Soviet intervention. Aftermath and global consequences following the invasion. Karmal attempted to reassure the Afghan public, promising to end torture and unify the PDPA, though skepticism prevailed as mass arrests and executions continued. By January 1980, nearly 430,000 Afghans had fled to Pakistan, reflecting widespread resistance and fear of communist repression. The Soviet Union's intervention sparked international condemnation, with the United States, United Kingdom, and United Nations criticizing the violation of Afghan sovereignty. President Jimmy Carter publicly denounced Soviet expansionism, warning of far-reaching consequences for global security and U.S. foreign relations. The U.S. shifting policy toward Pakistan increased military and financial support for the Mujahideen, coordinating with China, Saudi Arabia, and other Muslim nations to counter Soviet influence. Despite misgivings about Afghanistan's instability and the challenges of nation-building, the USSR relied on precedent from previous interventions in Czechoslovakia, Ethiopia, and Angola to justify its actions, viewing the PDPA as a potential vanguard party capable of leading revolution internally. Ultimately, Amin's defection from Soviet allegiance and overtures to the West tipped the balance, prompting Moscow to act decisively. The invasion marked the beginning of a protracted and bloody conflict, foreshadowing decades of resistance, regional instability, and Cold War confrontation that would culminate in the rise of U.S.-backed insurgencies and, eventually, the geopolitical crises of the 21st century. The Soviet gamble in Afghanistan, while initially tactically successful, underscored the perils of foreign intervention in a deeply divided and historically volatile society, leaving a legacy still debated by historians and policymakers today.